Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Arcane Secrets of Craft. This is episode 3, Definitions in Entomology, part 2. In the last episode, I mentioned don't trust any one single source of information, and this is true, but there's something I left out. When doing research, you will on occasion come across information that is conflicting. 90% of the time, the general information is considered correct or right. The last 10% of the time is when one tradition or another disagrees with something that could be very common. And that's for whatever reason, difference in ideology, or a different definition, or just difference in philosophy, whatnot. So keep that in mind, because just let's take a microcosmos of Wicca, for example. You have many different kinds. Let me go through a couple of this. The original Gardenarium, then that's split off to Alexandrian witchcraft, then there's Georgian witchcraft, then there's Dionysic witchcraft, and they really stray. And then there's Saxon witchcraft, and these are all different philosophies. Several of them have very rigid lineages, while Buckland Saxon has no lineage whatsoever. It's the most open and the most vague of them all, which is the most easy to manipulate and take a little of this and a little of that and mix it together and create your personal craft. In that way, or that regard, it's brilliant. And in some ways, it's horrible because there's no traditions to anchor you, per se, just a vague idea of a tradition. So this is something to keep in mind. Alright. One of my members on Facebook asked me, can a totem be used as a fetish? And the answer is yes, to an extent. There's always an exception to the rule. So if you have a totem, which is just a wood carving, and there's no spirit in it already, and you haven't found your spirit animal, well then you can use it as a fetish. It'll work just fine. Now, the reasons, if you already have a spirit animal and your spirit animal is already contained in your totem, you could then also use it as a fetish, and the reason why you might do that is generally two reasons, but there could be others. You could be taking a spirit and putting it in the totem, so your spirit animal can literally feed off of it. If that happens, generally it would be a more predatory animal, like a bear, for example, or a lion, or a wolf. The other reason why you might put it in there is if your spirit animal is quite powerful, and a malevolent spirit inside of it. It's in there for protection. It's the spirit is going to keep that, or your spirit animal, I should say, is going to keep the malevolent spirit at bay. It's going to keep it quiet and protect it and give it an extra level of protection so it can't get out. And then you could always remove it later if you know how. And we'll get to those lessons down the line, but we'll get to those lessons way down the line. Okay, so now let us get into our definitions. Okay, this first group is paranormal and supernatural. Alright. Paranormal definition: relating to some kind of force or event or phenomenon beyond the normal experience or explanation of science, knowledge, and understanding of the known laws of nature, referring to creatures from folklore, myth, and legend, such as giants, fairies, dragons, etc. Okay. Supernatural definition: an unexplained or unnatural force of nature or phenomenon, referring to an incorporeal entity such as a spirit, angel, demon, etc. Okay, what's the difference between these two? Because these two get confused for each other all the time, and that's mostly thanks to paranormal research. Because paranormal has been associated with spirits, and it's not meant to be. It was actually closer to supernatural research. Because supernatural is directed towards spirits, super, above and beyond us. That's where that comes from. And the paranormal is para, or alter, to our normal reality. So that's where you get fairies, or giants and things of that nature, sprites. And fairies is a more of an umbrella term, and we'll get into that too at some point. I don't know when, though. Moving on. Next group. Elixir and potion. Elixir. Definition. A liquid with a magical or medicinal properties, normally for a positive effect for an extended period of time with a limited side effect. Okay. Potion. Definition. A liquid with the powerful magical or medicinal properties for a positive or negative effect for a short period of time with possible dangerous side effects. Okay, here's the difference. An elixir is almost always associated with a positive aspect, generally healing. Elixirs or teas or tonics or brews generally are some kind of medicine to heal some kind of disease, sickness, ailment, or injury. A potion can be that in the short term. It could also be something that's going to give you a jolt of energy or a jolt of strength or endurance or speed, and also can be considered a poison. Certain poisons can kill you very quickly, so that would be a dangerous side effect. Just to give an example. Now, giving a modern example of what a potion could be would be a Red Bull or a 5-hour energy drink. One of those little shots. Gives you a lot of energy for a short term, and then you're going to be generally drained. It gives you a powerful effect in the short term, a couple hours. And then it wears off, and then you need more of it, or you need a rest. So that's an example of what a potion would be in the modern day. Okay, next group. Heathen and Pagan. Heathen. Definition. Dweller on the heath, one inhabiting uncultivated lands or that dwells on the hill. Pagan. Definition. There are two different and distinct definitions of pagan, the ancient and modern. Modern definition. A person or people that do not adhere to the Abrahamic or monotheistic deity, those of the major world religions, notably Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. Ancient definition. A person or people that live in the woods, countryside, or wilderness away from society. Okay. These two words are commonly used interchangeably to mean those that practice a polytheistic religion, and can also generally be associated with practicing magic. And they're not. Heathen is dweller in the heath or the hills. This generally was associated with the Norse because the place they lived was a rocky, hilly terrain. That's where that comes from. And pagan is someone who lives in the woods or countryside. So if you lived on a farm way out in the middle of nowhere, you would be a pagan. So farmers today could even be still considered pagan. The reason why pagan is generally associated with polytheistic deities is because it's generally associated with the Greeks and the Celts and the Egyptians and the Norse and etc. And they're polytheistic instead of monotheistic. But the definition does not actually even apply properly in the modern day, as Hindus, even though they are polytheistic, do not consider themselves to be pagan. They consider themselves to be Hindu. So any religion similar to this would not be considered pagan. They would be considered themselves. Okay, the Buddhists, for example, aren't monotheistic or polytheistic, as they don't really speak of deities at all, but they reference some of the Hindu deities, such as with the symbol of the victory banner and the four Maras. Voodoo wouldn't be considered, or Voldoon wouldn't be considered pagans. Neither would Santeria. The word pagan is more ideologically associated with Western occultism than anything else. And that's the big difference. So even the modern definition of the word pagan does not apply to realistically any polytheistic religion outside of Eastern or Western Europe. Okay. Moving on. Next group is Magick, Sympathetic Magick, Magickal Correspondences, Religio Magick, High Magick, and Low Magick. Magick. Definition. A body of practices usually associated with rituals that allows a person to harness the power of an individual's belief, thereby directing their focus and will intertwined with intent to create a desired effect. Sympathetic Magick. Definition. A person or item can be affected through an object usually intimately and symbolically associated with an action representing a feeling directed towards a person or people for a purpose. Magickal Correspondences. Definition. A mundane item relating to a relationship for a similar magical purpose. Religio Magick. Definition. A blending of magical and religious practices into a single philosophy by using ritual formula similar to High Magick. High Magick. Definition. Intricate and elaborate rituals, drawing heavily from astral and ethereal energies, drawn directly from the ether, primarily for the purpose of the evolution or the enlightenment of the soul, but not exclusively. Low Magick. Definition. Practical rituals drawing heavily from primordial energies, primarily focused on the manipulation of the material world. Sympathetic Magick and Magickal Correspondences. They get confused for each other all the time, and they're used interchangeably, and they're not supposed to be. There are distinct differences between them. Sympathetic Magick, a good way to look at this is through the emotion of love and hate. They're palatable. We've all experienced them. So let's say someone is sick, and they're very far away ritual healing. So you have to have an intimate connection, and through the symbolic meaning of this puppet that you're associating with the person, you're going to heal them through a distance. This is why it gets confused with Magickal Correspondences. Magickal Correspondence can also be associated with the puppet because the puppet represents a person. But beyond that, it represents nothing more. Like the color red is associated with love. The color green is associated with luck. The color dark blue is associated with intelligence. Light blue is associated with wisdom. Black is associated with protection. White is associated with purity. That's a magical correspondence. You're corresponding a mundane item to an idea that relates to a magical effect. I hope I explained the difference adequately. Religio Magick is actually pretty simple. Roman Catholicism is a really good example of Religio Magick, even though they will never admit to it. Where they're taking ritual use, which can be found in dozens, if not all, different forms of magical practices, and combined with religion. Pretty simple. High Magick and Low Magick are not the same thing. And they're not confused for the same thing, but their definitions from how they sound appear to be different than what they actually mean. Originally, High Magick was people who practiced magic high up on the hill. That means people that lived in cities that had a lot of means and could afford to have their own specific and unique ritual items, and their rituals were very intricate. They were drawing down celestial powers or greater wisdom from the gods. This is why it's also high magic is generally associated with demonology and to an extent necromancy. Low magic is practical magic. What that meant is more of a designation because you were in the lowlands. Low magic. Low magic is not bad or evil. It's simple. It's just meant as though it affects the material world because it's practical magic. If you are a farmer, you might need rain, or you would use magic for a good harvest, or to make sure your animal's labor was successful and the mother and the calf didn't die, or related towards people, making sure your wife gave birth to a healthy child and they didn't die, as infant mortality was very high in the 15th, 16th centuries, and even upwards to our modern day, to be honest. So it was primordial energies that affected us every day. Different kinds of divination would have been associated with high or low magic. So these are different designations that represent a different path of magic, but realistically not one is better than the other, because you can use high magic for healing or you can use low magic for healing. You're just going to go about it in two different ways. Okay, and I think this more or less explains the difference. So we can move on from here. And this is going to be the last definition in this episode, because this episode is going to start to get a little too long otherwise. Next group. Occult. Definition. Knowledge that is hidden or obscured. Occultism. Definition. The study of the craft or magic, such as astrology, demonology, divination, necromancy, spiritualism, etc. Occultist. Definition. The practice of the craft or magic, such as astrology, demonology, divination, necromancy, spiritualism, etc. This is actually very easy to explain. Occult is anything that's hidden or obscured. So I make jewelry, for example, but I don't know very much about open heart surgery. I may know what it is, I may know how it works, but I don't know how to do it. Now, that said, the information is not necessarily hidden for me. I could feasibly go read the books and understand how to do it, but I still wouldn't have the practical knowledge how to do it, so it's still obscured. It's pretty simple. Okay. Occultism and occultists. All occultists study occultism because we study it to practice it. That's the difference. Occultism is the study, occultist is the practice. It's a pretty simple difference. Okay, this appears to be a good place to stop the third episode, part 2. And we'll pick this up next week. And since this video was so late, I'm going to try to do 2 videos this week, hopefully. Anyway, I wish you all the best of luck with your research, and go in peace.